Welcome to the Love How Deep podcast with Brian and Heather Mayer. Our purpose is to equip married couples like you with resources that rely on the transformative power of God's Word to strengthen your relationship. Hey everybody, we are so excited that you have chosen to listen to our podcast and to hopefully learn some things that we have to say about marriage and maybe gain some ideas of what can make your marriage stronger. But really, it means so much to us that to have you out there listening. So, yes. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm excited about today because we are talking about a topic that is one that can be very tense, right?
It really can. So the title of this episode is Individual or Shared Financial Accounts in Marriage. That is something that can just cause the worst breakdown in marriages or even in dating relationships or whatever. Just learning more about each other when it comes to money and who's going to handle it and how are you going to talk about it and what are your goals and what are your dreams to do with the money. All of the above, it plays into your marriage. So we're going to break some things down today. Just by asking questions because, like I always say, it always comes down to communication. And that is what financial, I think, strength in your marriage comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
Comes down to communication, regardless of regardless of how much you have. It doesn't matter. Are you communicating about it? Are you on the same page about
it?
So,
is it good communication?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, once upon a time, it was common for married couples to have a shared checking account, a shared savings account. And, even before that, there was only one person working in the household. Mm-hmm. And so that was it. And so I guess it moved from that to both spouses are working. Now, what are we going to do with the money? Is it his money and her money? Who's paying for what? Do I know how much you have and vice versa? And that has continued to change over the years. The trend changed when Gen Y, or the Millennials, born between 1981 and 1996, and Gen Z, born between 97 and 2012, it's more of a popular trend for them to have their own checking accounts and savings accounts. Because sometimes I think it's because they're looking out for themselves. I don't know. Trust is definitely an issue mm-hmm. there. But times are always changing. I think that we all know that. What does it mean for you as a married couple? How do you change with that time? Right. Or do you change? Maybe you choose to stay the same with your money and your views of money. So mm-hmm. all good things to consider.
Yeah, it really just depends on what works for both of you. I don't necessarily know that there is a right or wrong answer on what to do here, but we're definitely going to talk about some pros and cons, and we're going to dive a little bit underneath the money, which is very important. But you and I are Gen X. So we were born between the years of 1965 and 1980. I don't know, do I need to reveal exactly how old you are?
Next.
We'll just keep people guessing.
Next point.
So, yeah, and in our generation, I really think generally our generation is mostly sharing accounts and everything is kind of collected together. I feel like for the most part, I don't know if you would agree with that, our friends. And
I think so.
Yeah, and it really... I do want to say that I think it did start to change with Gen Y and Gen Z. So if you're in those two generations, you probably know a little bit more about what I'm talking about. But so, that all being said, obviously that that we're Gen X and maybe we're a little bit more used to having joint accounts. We definitely are keeping an open mind to that separate account issue. But again, there's just some important things around that, and understanding kind of the motives underneath why you want to do a certain thing is very important that you will want to talk about with each other. And so just as Heather mentioned a minute ago, this episode really is just going to be, we're going to talk about an area that is important when it comes to individual or shared accounts. And then we'll give some questions that I think would be important for you as a couple to sit down and ask each other. And don't worry if you're driving or if you're on the treadmill or you're on a bicycle. All these questions will be in our show notes. If you just go to lovehowdeep.com/21, just for the episode 21, you'll be able to find them there. But listen up because we got some good things to say. So we're going to go all the way back, right, to childhood.
We are. Yeah, we do like to go back to childhood. How were you raised, and what was your family's view of money? And that plays into what your view of money is. And we talked extensively about this in a previous episode, spender versus saver dynamics and what that looks like. We even at that point talked about your childhood. So, just a couple of questions that you want to chat with each other about. Number one is, were there money struggles growing up? Was money tight, or was there more of it? Were you middle class or upper class? Were you on food stamps? Things like that really can affect an adult's view of money. But you've got to go all the way back to childhood and just kind of share that with each other. And I love questions like this because it just shows me, the more Brian and I share a certain things about our childhood with each other, it helps me understand him a little bit more and know him in a new way, new light, I guess. And then, did your parents discuss money in front of you or with you or that sort of thing? But was money discussed by your parents, and did you hear any of those conversations? Were the conversations amicable, or were they tense? Was there a lot of fighting going on, or was it, one person just did it all and the other person was just like, okay, kind of blindly trusting, but saying, okay, you're in charge of the finances, you do it, you're so good with Excel spreadsheets, yay. Sorry, what?
No, I just was going to jump in. I mean, people I think know my story, but I'll mention it again. My parents were divorced when I was, I think, 2 or 3 years old, and so unfortunately the only time I really remember money discussions between my parents were when they were very tense and there was a problem around money about something that needed to be paid for when it came to me. So I grew up probably not having a very good view of having conversations around money, knowing that it was probably going to be tense. So
right.
Yeah,
Right.
a little bit of my story.
Yeah, just kind of the history that you have, that personal history shapes your views on money. Here's another thing that you might want to talk about. Were there any financial calamities? Like, did one of your parents lose a job unexpectedly, or did you have a car repossessed, or did you go into extreme debt? Like, whatever it is, what happened, and how did your family handle that? Because that's going to shape your views on money. Was there financial betrayal, gambling, or large purchases where one parent did the large purchase and the other parent didn't know, and did that cause an outbreak of fights, that sort of thing? But financial betrayal, something good to talk about. And then the last but not least in this section, was tithing and giving important to your family growing up? So, tithing is something that the Bible commands us to do, 10% of our income to give back to the Lord, to the church. And was that a part of you growing up? And I will say for me, it was. I would get, oh my gosh, like $1 a week? Yeah. And as my allowance after I did my chores and stuff. And it was given to me in change so that I could then tithe 10 cents when I went to church on Sunday. So
That's a good habit to instill.
It really
for
is.
a child. I did not have that.
It really is. And so as an adult, that became super important to me, that no matter what, I was going to tithe. So during many, many times in my life when I was financially broke and I was not working because of health issues or whatever, I still tithed off of any money that I ended up receiving, whether it was a gift from someone or a little meager paycheck, whatever. I tithed, and I just believed that God would honor that obedience in tithing off of my income. But Brian, you had a different story there. Tithing was not a thing. Church was not really a thing.
Right now.
So I think that definitely played an important role when we got married, because you knew how important tithing was to me. And
right. It took me a while to get there.
Yes. For you, it was just like the dollar signs just flowing into the offering bag. Like, it was like, oh my gosh, like that's a lot of money to part with. But as you did it, you took that step of faith and you did it. You realized we could do without that 10%.
Yeah. After all the years that we've been doing it, God has always come through for us. And, I hate when I hear people say, I can't afford to tithe. And, typically the response is what? you can't
You
afford
can't
not
afford
to.
not to.
Right.
You can't
So,
afford not to. So,
anyway.
yeah, those are just a couple of questions to kind of get the ball rolling on your conversation about finances. And even before you approach the subject of like, are we going to put our money together or are we going to have our accounts separate? Talk about your childhood. Just kind of get down to that nitty gritty of how you were raised and the beliefs that were instilled in you over
Right.
time.
And if you listen to us for any length of time, you're going to notice with a lot of these heavy issues, we constantly will talk to you about talking about your past, about your childhood, and about your past relationships, because if you can create more understanding between each other, typically things go better. Your connection with each other increases. You kind of are able to look at each other as human beings, that have a past, and that, oh, okay, this is why you think this way, or this is why this is so important to you. And sometimes you can meet each other a little bit closer, more quickly because of that. You want me to talk about the next one?
Yeah, I think so.
So past relationships or past marriages is another thing that you want to talk about, because it is important that you both know how money was handled in those relationships. So that would be your first question to each other. How was money generally handled and discussed in past relationships? Next question, did you have joint or separate accounts? How did that work out? So again, that might be, if you had joint accounts and it worked out great, then you might come into this marriage or relationship that you're in now and think that joint accounts are the way to go, or maybe vice versa. And then, if you dive down underneath all of that, was there trust? Was there openness? Was there good communication around finances? I know in my first marriage, I think we had some issues in that area. It was sort of a very divided thing. There was a period in our marriage where I took care of the finances and did everything, and then we just didn't seem to have any money, and it got very depressing for me, and I just didn't like looking at it. So I basically handed it to my ex-wife and said, can you take care of this? And so she did, and then I sort of buried my head in the sand. So I think she probably had her head in the sand, and then I had mine in the second half of our marriage. So again, something I learned there, probably not a good thing.
Right. But your past relationships do play a role in how your viewpoint of money has been shaped over time. And so for me, like my ex-husband took care of all the money and took the money, and there was very little discussion about it, and it wasn't my business to question, kind of thing. There was a lot of I guess financial abuse. I don't.
Just control,
abuse. A lot of control.
Yeah.
Yes. So my past definitely there was a lot of abuse there and controlling behaviors and things like that. And so when we met, it was I don't know. To me, it's kind of interesting. You would think that I would have come into this marriage saying, I need to know every single penny that is spent. I want to see it. I'm going to take care of it myself. I'm going to do it. But that's not what happened. I was just basically like, no, you're good. I trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think that's just God healing me and changing me and helping me grow. And I knew that you were going to show me anything that I might have a question about. You were going to be open with me about all of it. And it has always worked, but I could absolutely see how someone who's been hurt by a previous relationship where money is concerned, you bring that as baggage into your new relationship, into your marriage, and it does affect you.
Right.
So just something that you want to make sure that you're talking about and working through. And because of those past hurts, really letting God heal your heart from that and help you kind of change your mindset.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to the fourth question in that section, were there any betrayals of trust around money? So obviously it sounds like yes, for sure. And I remember when we first got married, I don't really remember there ever being a problem around money with you. So I think it was God that healed you.
I think so.
And helped you.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that you even said to me, Heather, do you want to be in charge of the finances, the bank account, and all this kind of stuff, like balancing the checkbook kind of thing? And I was like, well, don't you? And you were just so open to me doing it, and I was
Mm.
completely open to you doing it because, it could be a little pain in the neck to have to balance that checkbook with all those receipts. And, before it was all online, we're
Hmm.
dating ourselves with that. That's fun. But shortly after it went
Right.
online, and that's how we did it now. But
That's right.
but it, I feel like, was such a natural conversation, and neither of us batted an eye at the other person taking care of it.
That
So,
is true.
yeah.
And then the last one, and we'll move on. Well, I don't want to move on too quickly because this is important, but tithing and giving, was that
Yep.
occurring in your previous relationship? And again, for me, it was not in my childhood, was not in my first marriage. And so, yeah, that one took a while for me to come around to. But again, it's a good question for each of you to talk to each other about.
Absolutely. And, I do want to say with that, um, just based upon our experience when we got married, or a little bit before we got married, you even said to me, you said, I know you're going to want me to tithe. I'm just not there yet. When we started dating, it was like, I'll throw a 20 in the plate kind of a thing. And you knew like what God's word said and what was expected. You knew where my heart was in regards of tithing. And you just took it very kind of slowly, I guess. You just continued to increase each month until you were actually officially tithing that 10%. And so it was, I think, I just want to encourage you, if you're not tithing yet, if you need to start with baby steps, you got to start somewhere and start with those baby steps, and see what God does, and
Mhm.
let Him grow you and stretch you and teach you how He um, is going to take care of you when you honor Him with the money that you make. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
love how that played out in it with us.
yeah. And isn't that the only place in the Bible that where God says, "Test me in this"? Is it with
Yes.
tithing?
Yes.
Yeah. So what he's saying there is, take a chance. Have some faith in me. I'll take care of you. I
Mm-hmm.
promise. And so just remember that if you're sitting there a little bit worried or wondering how it's going to work out. I mean, again, the God of our universe is telling us, "You can test me in that. I
Yeah.
promise I'll be faithful."
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's really good.
All
Um,
right, we're coming up to present moment. I think now we've
we
done enough
are.
with our past.
Yeah. So now we want you to think about your current goals and practices and your values in regards to money. What are your individual financial goals, and how do they align with shared goals as a couple? It's just something good to talk about. I might have a goal that I want to, you know, oh, my mind. I do not think well on the
Do you want
fly.
to save up
Give
for a
me a,
convertible? Is that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And maybe I don't want to.
Yeah. So maybe my goal is to, spend, $500 on my wardrobe every year or something like that. But does that align with the shared goal, or even Brian's financial goals of what he wants to do? Like buying some new tools or something. I don't know.
Hmm.
But what could the shared goal be? Maybe the shared goal is that you need to replace a car. And so maybe you don't spend that much on clothing or tools or coffee shop breaks or whatever. But just talking about what your goals are in regards to money. And I think that there's a blog. Help me out, Brian. I'm dying here. Isn't there a blog about setting financial goals?
Yes,
Yes,
there
that's
is.
you're going to talk about that at the end.
Yes, and
Yes,
we will put a link to the
there will.
blog in the show
Yeah.
notes.
So if you don't
Yeah.
even know if you have, like, you may not even have goals or even realize that you need to have goals for your money, there is a blog article that is going to be linked.
And
And
it's actually a workbook as well. There's a blog
yes,
article and a workbook. It's free,
correct.
and it'd really
Correct.
be cool if you would pick that up. And you can have some
Yeah.
great conversations with each other about your financial goals.
Yep.
But we'll
You
talk
really
about
could.
that again at the end as well.
Yes. So, another question to ask is, how do we currently handle our finances, and what aspects are working or what are not working for us? So, like I think we said in the beginning, we're not trying to tell you do one or do the other. There's pros or cons to both. And it really is up to the two people to figure out what's going to work best for you. So maybe some things are not working out depending on how you're handling it, and you want to make some changes. This is a good time to have that conversation, and, and get things in alignment there. And then another question: how can we incorporate biblical principles into our financial decisions, and what scriptures resonate with our approach? And so, Yeah, with how your money is spent, it's so important to pray about that and say, God, do I really need this right now? Is this your will? Like how does he wants to bless us, but he wants us to be wise too. So maybe we don't go out and buy that Tesla. Maybe we get something like, I don't know, a Volkswagen,
A Vespa.
a Vespa. Yeah, from Tesla to Vespa.
Right.
Okay,
That's a
yeah.
country song, right? I don't need no Tesla to impress her.
Oh, yeah.
Something about my Vespa.
Oh, yeah, that's where that's coming from. Oops.
Yes.
Okay, please don't turn us off yet. um, but yeah, what does the Bible say about that? And are you praying about how your money should be spent, especially if you're saving up for something? Is it in the will of God? You know. Another question is, are there specific financial values or principles that we want to prioritize in our marriage? So maybe after you've done the financial workbook or you've at least had a really good, deep conversation about how your money should be spent, is there some common goal that you say, yeah, we want to prioritize this? You know, another good question there. And then again, are we tithing? Yes, we keep bringing that up because we want God to bless you financially. And he says, he commands us to do it, and he does honor obedience. So talk about that with each other. Are we tithing? Where are we with this? Can we make it a goal? We need to make it a goal, whatever that looks like. Yeah.
Yep. Good stuff. And then underneath all of that is trust. So we're going to dive a little bit underneath some of the practical steps for just a moment and talk about trust. And a big question is, do you generally trust one another? And
that is huge.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a projection of mistrust based upon something that has happened in our life previously. Or,
that is accurate.
Yeah. Or it could be that maybe something has happened between the two of you that you need to work on and repair. And maybe there needs to be some forgiveness and some moving forward and some decisions to not do some things anymore that maybe you were doing that were hurtful. So that's a big one. Talk to each other. How comfortable are each of you with being transparent and, showing each other how much income you've got? What are your debts? What are your spending habits? Again, this probably sounds a little bit more like for premarital, but there could be some things in here, I think, as a married couple that would be helpful. We've heard several stories over the years about how someone brought in large amounts of debt or were defaulting on things and did not make it known until they got married, and it caused obviously large problems.
That's a big hardship right there.
Yeah. So, talk about that. Do you have any fears about bringing things together, or even keeping it separate? And what are those? Maybe if you feel like if you bring things together, are you feeling like you're losing some freedom? What does that mean to you? Why do you feel that way? If you keep things separate, are you, again, worried about things not being seen and things not being transparent? So those are questions to ask each other about. And then, again, what level of financial independence do you want within your marriage? And we'll talk a little bit more in a practical way in just a minute on this one. But just to get a general sense, do you want it to be, everything goes into one big pot and it's treated as ours? Or is there some, hey, I'll take care of this bill if you'll take care of that bill, and if we can trust each other, we'll be on the honor system. I mean, those are kinds of questions and discussions that you want to have with each other. So again, trust, can't emphasize that one enough. So now let's get practical. You want to get practical?
Yes. All right. So I just want to bounce off of what you just said, the level of financial independence in your marriage. And maybe this section is all about how you're going to manage your money. So it's really important to have a budget allowance discussion. And by that, I mean, every time we get paid, let's say that $100 goes into my pocket and $100 goes into Brian's pocket. And I can go to the coffee shop as much as I want to. I can go out to dinner with my friends as much as I want to. I can go down to the local clothing boutique and buy whatever I would like there. I think y'all get my drift there. And Brian has the freedom with the same amount. So it's an allowance, and it's not like, oh, this is all you can have. And, when you're out of your money, then you don't get any more. Like, we do kind of look at it that way, that like, if I use all of my $100 on day 2, I have a long time till I get my $100 again. Maybe I only spend $2 and have $98 left over. And next month I get another 100. Guess what? I got $198. I'm going to Amazon. I found something sparkly on there. So, but have that discussion about having an allowance so that you're not always having to go to the other person and say, hey, it's okay. Like, is this in the budget for me to buy this or for me to buy that? That's a real question that people might ask one another. Or if trust is an issue, well, guess what? It's my $100. I can spend it how I want to. Same with Brian. There's no need for us to look at trust as being broken, because that's kind of like it's our what did I call it the other day? We were in the shoe store. It's my walking around money. I was literally calling it that. That was my walking around money.
Right.
But that's what it is. And I think that can just be such a headache saver, because you've just got your own little bit of cash. Do what you want. Doesn't matter. You don't have to worry like, oh, when I run the card, like, are we going to go over in something else? Like, whatever. So with that,
can I say real quick?
Yes.
My very first allowance was $1, and I took it and went. I could walk across to the convenience store, and I bought a whatchamacallit candy bar. They still make those, right?
Yeah, that's
they're
good
kind of
bar.
Crunchy, crispy
Some
rice.
caramel in there.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
And then I also bought an icy. Do all the convenience stores
Sugar
make
overload.
icy? That's a brand called
Yeah.
Icy. It's like a slushy.
Yeah.
Yep. And so for $1, I guess the candy bar was 50
Nice.
cents, and then the drink was 50 cents. And so, yeah, I blew it all.
And then you went
But,
into a diabetic coma.
I think I might have. Yeah.
My
so,
gosh.
so yeah,
But
that
that's
was
what we
my
do.
first initiation with having an allowance.
That's what we do.
I think I'm better now about that, right?
Yes. Yes. The other thing that I wanted to mention was to maybe set a limit on how much are you okay with your spouse spending without talking to you. So if Brian goes to the local electronics store and he sees a new fancy schmancy TV, he's like fist pumping himself, and he decides to purchase it, but said TV costs $549. I'm like, whoa, what? You just did what? Like, that's pretty weighty financial decision to not share with me. So, we have that budget in mind of what we're going to run by each other, just to always make sure that we're communicating about the money. If I do see something that's, $150, I'm like, hey, Brian, do we have this in the budget? Because he is the one, like I said, that is got more eyes on the budget than I do. So it's just a good thing to talk about. So is there a cap that you want to put on that to keep you out of debt and to keep that communication rolling? Let's see, what's another question here. In what ways can combining or separating our finances enhance our ability to reach our financial goals together? So I'm going to go back to where I talked about those financial goals that you might set. What does it look like? How are you going to manage your money to reach those goals? Do you need to combine some things, or do you need to separate some things? What does that look like? And then, do you have a system for saving and budgeting, and how can joint or separate accounts support these practices? So again, looking at it both ways, just talk about all of the options and then figure out the one that would work best for you. And you may decide, this is what we're going to do. And in a month, you may say, whoa, why did we ever do that? Let's try this instead. And that's okay as well. That's okay, as long as you're always talking about it. And if we are not tithing or giving, the 10% that the Bible talks about, should we make a plan to change that? You always want to keep talking about that. And if you haven't reached that goal yet, what are you going to do, and how are you going to manage your money to be able to do that? If we're not giving to others, talk about the importance of that for each of us. Of like, if you have a friend that's in need, do you have a little bit of rainy day money set aside that maybe you were saving it for something else, but you know what, these people need some money, so we're gonna donate it to them or help them out, like whatever that looks like. Do you kind of have that worked into your budgeting, and is that something that you would want to do together? So yeah, those are just some questions on to help you kind of manage your money and figure that out.
Yeah. And I will say the giving to others, because we do it. I mean, I know we could be better about it and do it more, but there have been times where I'll think, I don't think we've really given to anyone recently. Why don't we do that? And I think that's kind of a neat sort of mindset shift that I've had over the years because, when I was younger, I would have never thought about that. I would have never sat there and thought, gosh, I haven't really given anything to anyone in a while. Maybe I should do that. It was all about what can I get? What can I do for myself? So,
Right.
yeah, so I think it's kind of neat. I think you actually, even the last time you had mentioned it to me, you said, I don't feel like we've really given something to someone in a while. So let's think about that. So that's great. So we have talked a lot about the past with our childhood and with past relationships. We've talked a lot about current, what are our goals? What do we do now? What are our values? Do we trust each other? How do we manage our money? Now I'm going to go a little bit into the future. And we're going to talk about sort of, okay, what are you going to do kind of moving forward? And I think I've got this one in the communication and a financial advisor section on the show notes. You've already really gone over it. I'll just mention it again, but it probably does fit here. But how we communicate going forward, make decisions about purchases, investments, financial commitments. I don't need to say a whole lot about that one because you've already talked about that. Second one is, have you considered consulting with a financial advisor to help you make some informed decisions about joint or separate accounts, or even things beyond that? That might be an easy decision to make without an advisor, but
I think
still.
sometimes getting that point of view from someone who's not emotionally or financially invested in it is always a good thing to get their take on it. Sometimes we can be a little too stuck in our own decisions, and it takes a third person to come alongside us and help us out.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And this next one, again, we've talked a little bit about this one previously when we talked about goals, practices, and values. But again, are there certain values or principles that you want to prioritize, maybe that are not there right now? So again, having a good conversation about that. Again, that might be like the spender versus saver principle. If you go back to episode number 19, that's where you'll find our talk about spending versus saving in a marriage. So that might be something that needs to be discussed and needed to be compromised on. And then, how often do you want to revisit and adjust what's going on in your finances? I know Heather and I so I created this spreadsheet a while back that has all of our usernames, all of our passwords for every account. And I mainly did it because I'm the one that handles all of it. And if something happens to me, you're going to be completely lost.
I would be lost.
Yes. And so my thought on that, and maybe I should discuss it with you right here, is how about every 6 months, we probably should revisit that sheet and make sure everything's up to date on it because things change.
Let's put it on the shared calendar.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Perfect. We just came up with something right here on the episode. So that's great. See, it's in action. You're seeing it in action. It's not just us telling you what to do. We're actually figuring things out ourselves. And then I guess I kind of rolled into this one as well. But again, what compromises are you going to make to ensure that your financial, the way you've got it arranged with the accounts and everything else, how does this support us being healthy and harmonious? Because if you don't have that, if you don't have, emotional health and you don't have harmony in your marriage, and I'm not talking about being perfect, but if you don't have these on a consistent, regular basis, then what's the point? What's the point in getting what I want or getting my way when we're not healthy and harmonious? So we've covered it all, I think, right?
I think so, yeah. So that should be hopefully a good conversation for you and your spouse to talk about where you stand on money, where it stems from and what it looks like now and what you might want to do differently and why, and then planning for your future. And, I hope that what you've picked up from this is that trust and communication are huge when it comes to your finances and figuring things out together. If you don't have trust and you don't have good communication, then compromising with each other and making decisions together can be very difficult, and we don't want that for you. Difficult seasons are going to come up. They always will. That car is going to break down. Somebody might get sick. A job might change where you're bringing in less income and that sort of thing. Those things are going to happen, but how do you handle that? You do handle it through God and with trust and communication. It's going to make it a little bit better to navigate. So, we also believe the power of prayer and God's word when it comes to finances and just working together. So I just want to read a couple of key verses for you. This is Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. So that first fruits, y'all, that's your tithe. And he says to honor him with that tithe. And then this next scripture is Matthew 6:21. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So what are you putting ahead of everything else that's most important?
Yeah, I've often heard with that one, if you look at your checking account and you sort of scroll through what you're spending money on, that is where your heart is.
Yeah.
So is your heart in eating out 6 times a week, or, at the shoe store, purchasing shoes every other week, or you get what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah. Philippians 4:19 also says, and my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. And I love that one because, even if you're in kind of a low place financially right now, just to know that when you put God first and you're trusting him with your finances, you are honoring him with your tithing, he is going to meet all of your needs according to his will for your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think if you do this with a pure heart and pure motives, he will reward you, and he will take care of you, and he will meet your needs.
Yeah.
But we just want to make sure that we're not doing it with the expectation that this is what I'm going to get if I do these things.
Agreed. It's not like, I'm going to tithe and I'm going to give so that I can get more in return. That really is the wrong kind of attitude to have. Right. It's more of like the Lord loves a cheerful giver. Mm-hmm. You give because he tells you to, and you do it with a cheerful heart and joy in your heart, not expecting to, get that Maserati next week.
That's right. That's right. And with that, we will go ahead and work on wrapping up. But before we say goodbye, I want to mention the free resource that we talked about earlier. It is called the Goal Setting 301 Financial Goals Workbook. And we've got a whole series on setting goals, a 101, 201, 301, and a 401. This 301.
Can y'all believe that? We literally have 4 goal setting things.
It's like a college degree in goal setting.
Yeah.
But this is 301 that we're talking about here.
Yes.
And this workbook will help you define what's important to each of you financially. And then you can come together to discuss and make agreements on what you want to work toward together. And just remember, when you're aligned financially, you build trust, your future can be much more secure. And, obviously remembering that God is the one in whom we should find ultimate security beyond anything else, even money. So make sure to include him in everything that you do. And that the link for that is in the show notes. And with that, we will go ahead and say goodbye. And thank you so much for tuning in as always. We appreciate your time, and we will catch you on the next episode.